My name is Lon Allen, and I'm on the board of directors of KCAT Channel 15, which is our community television station here in Monte Sereno.
Welcome to Coffee&Candidates.
The upcoming election is very important as 3 of the 5 council seats are open. To help us understand the issues, Dr. Larry Gerston, a political analyst with a nationwide reputation, will be interviewing the candidates. Dr. Gerston will ask the candidates about the issues that will be before the council the next 4 years. Please listen carefully so you could determine which candidates have a vision that mirrors your own. As a former mayor of Monte Sereno, I can tell you that it is very important that we have a city council that reflects the values of our community. Lastly, I'd like to encourage you to let us know whether our community television station is meeting your needs. We have a very short 3-question survey on our website, kcat.org, so please go up and let us know how we are serving this community of Monte Sereno. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm hosting Coffee and the Candidates this morning at the KCAT studios. Want to see what it's all about? Come on in. Hi everybody.
Hi Larry.
Good to see you. I love my coffee. And thank you, Cafeteria, for providing this coffee throughout this series of Coffee and the Candidates. Welcome to Coffee and the Candidates. My name is Larry Gerston. I'm the host of this very important series, sponsored by the Los Gatos Community Foundation and, of course, under the auspices of KCAT, which is making this all possible. Now, you've got a lot to do between now and November 6th, thinking about all these important races, but we don't want to leave out the City Council of Monte Sereno and the Town Council of Los Gatos, which is what these meetings are all about, because when you get down to it, you have more to do with these people than you do almost anybody else. Which leads us to today's meeting. We're talking today with Shawn Leuthold. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, Leuthold, thank you.
Leuthold, forgive me. It's Shawn Leuthold. I asked him and I still forgot it. It's Shawn Leuthold, a candidate for the Monte Sereno City Council, right?
Yes, that's right.
And you are running for the first time.
That is true.
And what's it like, running for office and watching others who run for office? That's 2 different animals. What's it like pounding the pavement out there?
Yeah, well, it's completely different. I was supportive of my neighbor a few years ago when he ran, and now doing this myself, that's a huge amount of time and energy that goes into it. But it's really enjoyable to talk to everybody, and that changes the perspective here.
What are you learning as you talk to people? Do you find yourself telling them more about you than you hear from them, or learning more from them than what you say to them?
Well, that's something I've been doing when I go around and talk to people. I listen to them, and I'm not very interested in talking about myself. I don't have a whole lot of agenda that I'm trying to change Monte Sereno, except in the way the government is run and interacts with the people. So I'm starting at the beginning of that by talking to people and listening to them and finding out what they want and what they care about.
You had a turning point in activism when it came to dealing with the Baptist Church,
right,
on Daves Avenue?
Yeah.
And their proposal to have some residential units on the campus there. Tell us about that.
Well, that was what got me involved with my neighborhood and then ultimately with politics. The City Council decided that in meeting the state housing mandate, they were going to zone the church for multifamily housing. When that had been going on for many years as a possibility, but then it came up very suddenly. They mailed the mailers out to people within 300 feet of the church, and then they scheduled the meeting where they were going to approve this for 4 days later at the city council meeting. So some of my neighbors came, talked to me, and we went around to the whole neighborhood to let the neighborhood as a whole know what was going on. had dozens and dozens of people show up at the city council meeting, delayed the vote, and that began this kind of odyssey of figuring out how to oppose that.
So you found yourself upset with the process. You felt that the residents really weren't given ample opportunity to respond to this proposal. Is that right?
That's right, and it ultimately, and probably the best description is a lack of transparency in government, and this idea that you can only send to the local neighbors was very upsetting. Ultimately, they agreed to bring in the whole community, mail to the whole community, and then we had a lot of opposition. The city council really didn't appreciate that because they thought they had this locked up and it was going to be easy. They put through the vote anyway, and then we took that motivation that had built to ultimately into a petition and referendum.
So citizen turned activist turned candidate.
That's right. And I think that's probably a pretty common path, and it's certainly one that I never expected to be headed down. Politics were the last thing I was interested in. And being brought into it, local politics is really something that's very different, I think, than being a politician and being national.
Retail campaigning, door-to-door, shopping centers, leafleting, things like that. You don't see that because people who run for Congress or the Senate, just too many voters in the district to reach out that way, right?
That's right. And in fact, I spoke with several previous candidates and council members, and they said that's the way we do this locally. You walk around and you talk to the neighbors, and if they like you and like what you're expressing to them and the way you listen to them, then they'll vote for you.
You were inspired by the church asking for residential housing in an area not zoned for it. And at the same time that's occurred, of course, we're reminded of the state mandate that you referred to a few minutes ago, requiring everybody, including Monte Sereno, to provide enough moderately priced and low-cost housing to meet certain state obligations. Some of that's been done now. It looks to be done with the, 34 units now being proposed at where Hacienda is,
right?
Does that do it for you? Do you think that the town now has met its obligation and we go on to worry about other things, at least between now and 2023, or is there more to worry about?
Well, first, I do want to correct the church wasn't asking for the zoning. In fact, the church was the strongest advocate against the zoning, and that was really critical to how we felt about it, because this wasn't exactly a NIMBY issue. It was standing up for the owner's rights and saying that things like zoning changes shouldn't be imposed on unwilling neighbors if at all possible. Okay. So that's first. But the housing mandate is an important issue. It is absolutely the most important issue in Monte Sereno and maybe for the state of California at a local level. Monte Sereno has solved its housing mandate through use of the hacienda, and there we had a willing owner in Monte Sereno's sphere of influence who was able to bring his project that he'd been working on for a long time in and solve the mandated number of units. We needed 15 multifamily units. And that now is taken care of through 2023. But we have to look at this long term. And we have to figure out where Monte Sereno fits in the whole process of increasing housing over time. It's a real problem for Monte Sereno because the city is basically zoned and built out. We have literally the school at Dave's Avenue, we have the church property, we have the city hall property, and then we have a few private properties that are much smaller that could possibly be places where new houses could go in that aren't just simple residential houses. So Monte Sereno faces what we think of as unique challenges. And we've got to figure out how we're going to participate in increasing housing in the community.
Some people talked about urging the development of more granny units, small houses in the back of the big house, as a way of offsetting some of those requirements. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, that's the easiest thing for the city to do. They've already approved that. The state has set the guidelines. The city has put through the laws allowing that. And the city's been working with a lot of people. First, to bring in the illegal granny units that people already had. and now to promote people putting in granny units. The important thing with the granny units is that they currently qualify for low-income housing. Because generally they're going to be rented to people. If they are rented at all, they'll be rented to somebody at a much below Monte Sereno's market rates. Mm-hmm. So the granny units are very important to provide some housing at below what the rents would otherwise be. That needs to continue.
Okay. You when you talked about, used the word, the odyssey that you've gone through, transformation from citizen to activist to candidate, you mentioned your concern with the transparency in local government. What would you do to increase transparency? That's a concern not only in Monte Sereno, just about everybody has that concern. So what would you do to make that better, to make it more seamless?
Right. Well, very specifically to Monte Sereno, there's been a lot of change in our city government over the last 4 or 5 years. The city manager left, who had been with the city for 19 years. Our building inspector, I think he was here 30 years, he left. And so there's been a lot of change there. There's been a lot of change in the city council at the last election, and moving into the new one, no matter who's elected, we're going to have a very different city than we had 5 or 6 years ago. That, for our local politics, is going to create a lot of opportunity for change. The new city manager is very interested in improving, using technology, reaching out to the citizens, and having this community involvement. Because we're such a small community, 2,500 or so voters, a little over 3,000 residents in just over 1,000 homes, we really have the opportunity that everyone can talk to their government, everyone can participate in the process. So we've got a great starting point. Most important for the changes, what I'm looking to see, is changes in the way the City Council publishes what it's working on. None of this 4 days, and that's what they've been doing. They've been publishing their agenda on Friday at 4:59 and having the meeting where decisions are made at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. And I think we all agree that is a completely unacceptable way to govern the city when no one has a chance to talk to their city officials and to influence what that agenda is.
And the city council still hasn't changed that period, or not yet?
No, they haven't changed that. And there was talk just at the last council meeting when something again came up by surprise that it should change. But it has not been figured out how they're going to have a rolling agenda, how they're going to talk about what's coming up a month from now. So for us, the agenda and the agenda process is critical. The other thing is, I think we really need citizen involvement. And so I think we're gonna, what I would be looking for is a lot more citizen commissions.
I'm somewhat perplexed that it's so difficult to say we're putting something on notice for the public, it will be discussed in 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know why that's so difficult. Is it the sense that the council, right or wrong, is the sense that the council has been sort of like trying to buffalo people, push things by them without them having ample notice?
That's the sense that the community has. Mm-hmm. That's not exactly correct, because I've spoken with a lot of the council members and they have the same frustration. So what's happening is, in the past, the city agenda was set by the city manager and the city staff. And the council themselves were very frustrated that they were getting staff reports dumped on their desks at 4:59 on Friday to vote on Tuesday. So that was the problem in Monte Sereno historically. And with the new city manager, that we have an openness to change that we didn't have for the last 19 years.
Okay, so the last city manager said, this is the way we're doing it, and they just kept, or she, I don't know who it was, they kept doing it, even though the council began to have concerns about this. And you believe that with the new city manager that there will be an openness that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, there's a real opportunity for change, and we're hearing there's the openness. Now the challenge internally is to figure out how to structure that change to be in compliance with all of the mandates of the state and the state laws. The Brown Act being one example.
Yes, of course.
It's very complicated for the city council members to speak among themselves on issues that are coming up, because no more than two of them can meet on any particular issue. So I've come from a background of business where the board of directors would tell the management what's important in the company. In government, it's a little different than that because the council should be telling city staff what to do, but it's very complicated as to how they coordinate that issue amongst themselves, gather what they need to know, and then get back to the staff and set the staff's agenda.
And this is one of your goals, to make sure that that's open.
Absolutely. We've got to open up this process, and we've got to get people involved, because what we find is somehow the way I came into it, by surprise. That's happening to people on all sorts of issues. There was one recently about the use of the annex next to the city hall. There was suddenly a proposal in the budget to put in a library kiosk outreach type of remodel in there. And it suddenly showed up on the council's agenda, and the council members had not heard of this before. And more important, the citizens had not heard of it.
Sounds like the town manager, intentionally or unintentionally, was really kind of controlling the agenda, even beyond the capabilities of the elected officials.
Yeah,
which is where you want to turn things.
Exactly, and we need to turn that around so that ideas come up, are communicated with the citizens can communicate with the council, and then we can decide where to go. So that's really going to be critical going forward. But there are also challenges in that with how to communicate with citizens. And I'm finding that as I walk around and talk to people.
Let's talk a little bit about communicating about another issue, and that is the congestion on Highway 17. That, of course, is largely a Los Gatos issue, but certainly spills over to Monte Sereno when you're looking at Highway 9 or you're looking at Winchester Boulevard. You know, both of those areas, and people cutting through the neighborhoods. What are your thoughts about that? How could this be better managed?
Yeah, it's a big frustration for everybody. It's not one that we find any easy solutions to, because certainly from Monte Sereno's point of view, there's not much that we can control about that, other than trying to work closely with Los Gatos and with Caltrans. The issue of Highway 17 traffic has been around forever. My grandfather used to live in Scotts Valley, and he tells me the stories about when he was coming through the orchards in Campbell next to the prune yard, which was a prune yard, and that there were traffic issues back then. We see this in the Los Gatos paper with their look back. But the issue has really come to a head in the recent years because of some of the mapping technology, and that has been routing people onto city streets. And we need to figure out how to address that, probably using technology to address the technology issue, either working with those companies to make it clear that they shouldn't route people onto city streets where it just backs up and doesn't save anybody time, but does affect our residents and their safety. So that's part of it. Caltrans has been good about telling people to stay on the highway lately. And I think we've seen some improvement this year with the signage that Los Gatos has been putting out, telling people to stay on the highway.
Do you think more signals on Highway 9 or on Winchester to slow traffic down, to show them, you might as well stay on 17 because we're going to have you going through at a snail's pace? Is that a possibility?
That's something Los Gatos is probably going to need to look into. Signals are very expensive, changes are very expensive, the studies that go with them are very expensive. It's certainly something Monte Sereno would be supportive of, but that is going to be key, because the technology, the mapping softwares for the most part tell you what the fastest route is going to be. If we can make that route less fast without increasing the traffic jam that causes it to be less fast, that will be a solution.
Going to ask you this question. Let's say you're elected. November 7th, you're in. You're going to be sworn in shortly after that. I guess you take over January. Tell me the first thing you want to work on as a member of the City Council.
Well, there's two things that need to be worked on first thing. Number one is the housing mandate. We have to get citizen commission and involvement immediately. Come up with the ideas of how Monte Sereno is going to fit into the state housing mandate. and whether there's hope of regionalization. This is all going on right now. It needs to continue, but we can't pause. We can't wait till the end. So number one item at the big scale is that. Coming down to my personal agenda of what I want to see happen right away, that's improving the communications with the citizens, working with the city manager to make that happen. Terry Blount is the city manager. He's got some good ideas. And I think getting on that and implementing it right away is critical. Most important, and the entree we have into that is through some of the safety alerts and the earthquake preparedness, which Santa Clara County is pushing right now. They have been implementing this in Campbell already and some of the other cities, having block leaders. And one of the nice things about that, from my point of view, is the block leaders get to know all their neighbors. And then as a natural effect, get a much closer sense of community. So starting with the earthquake preparedness and safety issues, and then turning that into neighbors really knowing their neighbors. I'd like to see the city supporting block parties on a rotating basis, not because we have a major safety issue, but because we have a major neighbors knowing neighbors issue. When I moved in, that was my first impression of Monte Sereno, was it took a long time for the neighbors to warm up to a new neighbor. They weren't mean-spirited or unwelcoming. They just had busy lives and weren't able to reach out to the neighbors the way that, that a small community really has the opportunity to do that.
Well, you've certainly got an opportunity to do a lot of that between now and November 6th, and you've got the opportunity to hear Shawn Leuthold and all the other candidates between now and November 6th. Thanks very much for coming to us this morning in our little visit, Coffee and the Candidates.
Thank you so much.
For the record, KCAT TV reached out to all the candidates running for Los Gatos Town Council and Monte Sereno City Council. Candidates Steve Leonardis and Ben McLean did not respond to our invitation.